You are listening to Fervent Word, an online Bible study ministry with teachings and tools to help you grow deeper in your relationship with God. The following message was taught by B Simmons in 2022.
As we look at Psalm chapter 16 this morning, I want to begin by asking, do you ever give yourself pep talks? Do you have like a morning routine? Maybe you rub your head and say, I feel good, I feel great, I feel wonderful. Flashback to What About Bob? Great movie, you never seen it? There's another great movie which inspires one of my most common pep talks that I give to myself. It's a movie called Cool Runnings. You guys ever seen Cool Runnings? Crazy, silly, zany, slightly based on a true story of the Jamaicans going to the Olympics for the bobsled competition. And there's this one scene where one of the guys, Sanka, he is a pushcart racer, and he is assembling the pushcart for his race there in Jamaica, and he has a bunch of neighborhood kids helping him to assemble his pushcart so that he can, get it all together and to win the race. But as they're putting it together, the kids keep getting distracted, and he keeps having to remind them to, continue to be involved in the work. And there's this one part where the kids are talking about, well, my grandpa says this person's going to win, and my grandpa says this person's going to win. And Sanka says, you know what my grandfather says? Get back to work. This is a pep talk I often give myself. As I am distracted, I find myself doom scrolling on Facebook. And then I picture Sanka in my head and I go, get back to work. I got to get back to the things that are important. And when I'm, tired and there's still things to do and I just want to kind of just chill out or goof off or play around, I give myself the pep talk. I kind of shout at myself a little bit. I'm a little bit rough with myself sometimes and say, hey, stop being lazy, stop goofing around, and you need to get to work. We, I think, all have those kinds of pep talks that we give ourselves where we know there's something important, we know there's something that needs to be stirred up, and we have to direct this announcement, direct this encouragement, direct this message to ourselves, to stir up ourselves, and to be focused on the things that matter. And David was a man who knew how to talk to himself. He knew how to stir up his soul. And many of the Psalms is him actually addressing his soul and saying, hey, be encouraged, do the things that God has for you. And Psalm chapter 16 is a similar psalm. And I would encourage you to consider David's example here in how he spoke to himself. I've titled the message here in Psalm chapter 16 this morning, Remind Yourself How Good You Have It with God. Remind yourself how good you have it with God. Sometimes looking at things that are happening around us, looking at perhaps situations that unfold or people, their success, their failure, our own difficulties and challenges, as we take in some of the things around us, we can lose sight of how much we have in God and how good it is for us to be in a walk with Him and in a relationship with Him. And so I want to encourage you this morning to be mindful of and to stir up your mind, to give yourself a pep talk perhaps, and let yourself be encouraged and strengthened with how much goodness you have in your relationship with God. We're going to walk through a few reminders, 5 reminders here, 5 good things that you have with God that you should be mindful of and stir up and call to memory about. The first point found in the first few verses here is, with God, I have someone to trust. Here's something that you can count on and that you need to be mindful of. With God, as you walk with God, you have someone always present in your life that you can trust in and count on. Check out what David says here again in verse 1. He says, Preserve me, O God, for in you I put my trust. O my soul. See him talking to himself there. O my soul, you have said to the Lord, you are my Lord. My goodness is nothing apart from you. As for the saints who are on the earth, they are the excellent ones, in whom is all my delight. David here is addressing himself to stir up in his mind, to stir up in his heart the strength and the reminder that comes from knowing that he trusts in God. And it's interesting to note that it starts out in verse 1 with David crying out to God for help. It gives us a little bit of the context of the situation. We don't know what specific situation David is in at this time, but he's in some sort of difficulty. And so he says, "Preserve me, O God, for in you I put my trust." Whatever he is facing a situation where he needs deliverance. He needs preservation. He needs help to escape and to survive the predicament that he is in. And so he's calling out, "God, preserve me." But then in the very next verse, he's like, "Oh yeah, I have God with me." He's calling out, and so, sometimes you'll see a psalm that begins like this, "Preserve me, O God," and then the whole rest of the psalm will be calling out to God for help and asking God to save in different ways, and it will just, the whole thing will be a call, a plea for God to help in a situation. But here David takes a different turn. He calls out for help, and then he says, "Wait a minute, I have help. I can trust in you, God." And he reminds himself, he says, "Oh, my soul, remember what you have said. Soul, you told God that I trust you. Soul, you told God that I have nothing apart from you. Soul, you told God that we were bound in a relationship and commitment to one another. Soul, remember, you need to remember." Here as his soul is crying out, "Lord, I need help. I need to be saved. I need preservation." David also says, "Yes, soul, you do need that, but also remember, you trust God. And with God, you always have someone to count on. Remember the commitment that you made to God. Remember what you said to the Lord." David directs to himself, to his own soul. "Remember that you have decided to trust God completely." And so he says, "Oh, my soul, you have said to the Lord, my goodness is nothing apart from you." You can think of this in all forms of goodness. Any good that I can do, David says, "Hey, soul, you need to remember, I cannot do anything good apart from God." Any good thing in my life, David says to his soul, "Soul, you need to remember, you cannot have any good thing in your life apart from God. Any good thing that I could receive." He says, "Soul, remember, don't forget, you have said to the Lord, the only good things that I have in this life come from you." And so he stirs up in his own soul, he stirs up the reminder of what he has committed to the Lord, what he has said to the Lord, that he has always someone he can trust because he is with God. And apart from God, he can have no good. He can do no good. He can experience no real good. Jesus said something similar in John chapter 15 to us. He says, instructing us to abide in him. He says, "Abide in me and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit of itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide with me. I am the vine, you are the branches. He who abides in me and I in him bears much fruit, for without me you can do nothing." Jesus gives us this illustration of the vine and the branches, and we are completely dependent upon the Lord as much as a branch is dependent upon the vine. And if we're not plugged into the vine, if we're not with the Lord, we have no nutrition, we have nothing good. Apart from Jesus, apart from the Lord, if we separate that branch, it can do nothing. But as we stay connected, then there is fruit, there is fruitfulness, and there is the good work of God that is taking place in our lives. With God, I have someone to trust. Even when we face situations where we would call out to God and say, "Preserve me, God. Help me in this situation." And perhaps especially in those times, we need to remind ourselves. Sometimes when we are in that place of needing deliverance, we need to be rescued, and we're stressed and concerned about how things are going to unfold and how we're going to get out of this situation, how the bills are going to get paid, or what the doctor is going to say, or whatever the case might be. In those situations, we need this reminder to stir up in ourselves, we have someone to trust. Someone who has promised to work all things together for good to those who love him and are the called according to his purpose. All my goodness is found in you, Lord. And I can trust you to do good on my behalf. I can trust that if there's anything good, you will bring it forth. If I can trust you that if anything is happening in my life, you know how to bring about good from it. If there's anything that I'm lacking that would be good for me, Lord, I can trust that you can fulfill it and will fulfill it. With God, I have someone that I can trust in. And I need to be reminded sometimes. Hopefully you have people around you that can help you, remind you of these things also, but sometimes you just got to look in the mirror and say, self, oh my soul, with God, I have someone to trust. I've put my trust in you, God. I can trust in you, and I am nothing apart from you. Moving on to verse 4, we get the second point to consider this morning. The second reminder that we need to extend to ourselves once and again. With God, I escape many sorrows. Check out verse 4. Their sorrows shall be multiplied who hasten after another God. Their drink offerings of blood I will not offer, nor take up their names on my lips. Sometimes when we see people around us, especially those who do not know the Lord, when we see them succeed, when we see them, what we would call be blessed, that they have good things happening in their life, they have victories that are taking place, sometimes it can be quite tempting to look at others who do not know the Lord, do not walk with the Lord, and see the success that they're having or the things that they're getting away with, and we can begin to be a little bit jealous, a little bit envious. And there's other Psalms that deal with this as well, other scriptures as well, where we need to check our hearts, because it sometimes seems like people who don't care about God and want nothing to do with God really have it all going on pretty well, and everything happens pretty smoothly for them. And the appearance that we see and the perception that we have many times is that it's going great for them. Here I am, Lord, trying to honor you and serve you and walk with you, and why does it have to be so miserable for me? And we can wrestle with questions like, is it really worth it to walk with the Lord? Is it really worth it to name the name of the Lord and to try to be faithful to the Lord when I can see others around me who have no care about God or the things of God, and yet it seems to be so much better for them? Here, verse 4 is a great reminder for us. Those who hasten after another God multiply their sorrows. There's a bigger picture than what we might see in an immediate scene or what we can take in and perceive in the lives of people around us. And even in the midst of great successes, people are many times masking or hiding the multitude of sorrows that plague their heart and their mind. There's more to the story than what just is visible on the surface. And the reality is, when we disregard God, when we disobey God, when we pursue a course away from God, we multiply our sorrows. We multiply our sorrows. Now, that doesn't mean that when we are walking with God and right with God, we never experience any sorrow. You don't have to go far back, right? Just go back to the book of Job and be reminded of the most righteous man that God announced before the enemy as Job as the righteous man, the example of righteousness on the earth, he experienced great affliction. In Psalm chapter 34, we'll get to that in a couple days, going through the Bible in 3 years. Psalm 34, verse 19, tells us, "Many are the afflictions of the righteous, but the Lord delivers him out of them all." Many are the afflictions of the righteous, but the Lord delivers him out of them all. For those who chase after another god, for those who care nothing to seek God or to walk with God, there's a multiplication of sorrows. And it's not that if you follow the Lord you have no sorrows, but you have no needless sorrows. It's not that you have no sorrows, but you have no useless sorrows. That the sorrows that are allowed into our lives, the difficulties and the challenges where we would have to cry out, "Oh Lord, preserve me," those situations that we face, yes, they're afflictions, yes, they are sorrows, but because we can trust in God, we can know that God is able to work out good in the midst of it. But that is not the same for those who hasten after another god. That famous verse, and I've already shared it before this morning, Romans 8:28. God works all things together for good. If you just stop there, then you don't get the whole picture, because it goes on to say, "To those who love him and are the called according to his purpose." Not every situation works out for good for everybody. It's everybody who loves the Lord, who are the called according to his purpose. Those people, God works all things together for good for them. But you know what happens to those who hasten after another god? Their sorrows multiply. Their sorrows increase. Even if you may not see it at the moment, and even if the sorrows may not be experienced right this instant or immediately in pursuing the life that they've chosen to pursue, we know the promise of the Scriptures. The wages of sin is death. Sin will always bring about more sorrow than it does pleasure. Sin will always hasten the sorrows and increase the sorrows in our lives. Again, it doesn't mean for those who follow the Lord that we have a problem-free life, but it means that we can trust and know, even though we have sorrow, our sorrows are for a reason, and our sorrows will be minimized, not multiplied. With God, I escape many sorrows. That passage in Romans chapter 6 is a really good one to meditate on. Paul says in Romans 6:21, "What fruit did you then have in the things of which you are now ashamed? For the end of those things is death." It's a good call to consider. Another good reminder to yourself. Think back. The things that you are now ashamed of, what fruit do you really have from those things? When you disregarded God and disobeyed God, of course, at the time, it looked so appealing. It seemed like the right thing. It was very attractive. Hopefully now, looking back on that disobedience, you're ashamed. I was so foolish to think that I could get away with that, to think that that would bring me joy, to think that that would resolve these issues of my heart, to disobey God in that way. But it's not just that they didn't resolve well when we disobeyed God back then. But Paul says, call to mind, what fruit did you have? Did it bring you the pleasure that it promised? Did it bring you the joy that it promised? Sin always promises great pleasure. It always promises incredible fulfillment. It always promises, the pinnacle and peak of what you can have in the human existence. Sin always promises those things. But it never bears that fruit. You never actually get to experience that pleasure that is promised in the temptation that is presented, in the sin that entices so greatly. And so later on, the fruit that we have is just shame for believing that lie, for being deceived and thinking that disregarding God and walking our own path could be successful when it was so obviously going to bring forth death. The wages of sin is death. But the gift of God is eternal life in Christ Jesus our Lord. Listen, with God, I escape many sorrows. And I need to be reminded. Perhaps you need to look in the mirror and remind yourself of the good that you have in God. You have it so good with God. Because when you do face sorrows, when you do experience affliction, it is always going to be useful and for a purpose and have meaning, and God is going to work good in it. But apart from God, there's a multiplication of sorrows. There's much more sorrows. They might be realized later on down the line, and so you might not see them all take place at the moment, but the sorrows will multiply. And there will not be the same meaning or value in them. With God, I escape many sorrows. Moving on to consider a couple more things. Here in verse 5 and 6, we get number 3, with God, I have a good inheritance. Verse 5 says, O Lord, you are the portion of my inheritance and my cup. You maintain my lot. The lines have fallen to me in pleasant places. Yes, I have a good inheritance. The inheritance that we have with God is good. It's an incredible inheritance. And, we could think about that in a couple ways. Of course, we have an eternal inheritance. 1 Peter chapter 1 talks about that. The inheritance, incorruptible, undefiled, that does not fade away. It's reserved in heaven for you as a believer in Jesus. But eternity is more the subject of a couple verses down. Another aspect of our inheritance that I would encourage you to consider is what we experience now in this life, in addition to eternity. Inheritance also speaks to this life, and the language that David is using here recalls to mind the allotment that was given to the tribes of Israel as they moved into the promised land. The whole land of Canaan was divided up by lot. And so they worked through a process. Okay, here is the tribe, and how many people are in your tribe? What's the population? Okay, so you're going to need this much land. And okay, we were left off here with this tribe, and so now we're continuing on, and by lot, figuring out, okay, this much land is going to go to the tribe of Manasseh, and this much land is going to go to the tribe of Judah. Now, the tribe of Judah was basically just a collection of families. And so the tribe of Judah was made up of a bunch of families. And so then the tribe of Judah was further divided down by family. And so each family would receive their lot, their inheritance of the promised land, a piece of property of a certain square footage that they would be able to live on and work and produce crops on, and that would stay in their family, and it would be passed down from generation to generation. It was an inheritance. There was a tribe that didn't get a piece of land, a portion to them in this process, the Levites. And to the Levites, God said, I am your inheritance. And there's some allusions to this in what David is saying here. In verse 5, O Lord, you are the portion of my inheritance and my cup. You maintain my lot. And so he's saying, Lord, my relationship with you is my inheritance. What I have with you right now is my inheritance. You maintain my lot. What I'm experiencing in this life is part of my inheritance. And my walk with you through the midst of it is my inheritance. You can think about your inheritance from Adam. Did you know you have an inheritance from Adam? Yes, first man created back in the Garden of Eden. Adam and Eve left to you a sinful nature. You have inherited, passed down from generation to generation to generation to generation, a sinful nature. But there's also another inheritance that you can have from Jesus, which is redemption, forgiveness, fellowship with God, to be born again, passed down from generation to generation to generation, this time not by blood, but this time by faith. In that way, you can be receiving an inheritance from Abraham, the father of faith. Father Abraham had many sons, right? That's not talking physical bloodline sons. That's talking people who would trust God like Abraham did and be made righteous with God and have a righteous relationship with God because they believed God at his word. So you have an inheritance from Adam, but if you'll receive it, if you will believe God at his word, you have an inheritance from Jesus that overrides, that counteracts, and defeats the inheritance from Adam, that sinful nature, and you now have fellowship with God. Inheritance, in a lot of ways, is something that is outside of your control. I mean, unless you're, trying to take out your parents to be able to collect the inheritance, you don't really have a lot of say in the timing of it, right? It's outside of your control. What you receive as an inheritance, what is passed down to you, that's outside of your control. You were passed down the sinful nature. You didn't have a say in that. You didn't get to choose it. It was just, that's what was given. The inheritance found in Jesus, that was outside of your control, but it is within your control to receive that inheritance and to benefit from it. I think it's appropriate and interesting to consider pretty much all things in my life that are outside of my control. It's part of my inheritance. And I would really ask you to consider that. The things in your life that frustrate you, but you're powerless to change. It's not like you're making a decision about it one way or the other. It's just circumstances, external things that are happening around you, that are impacting you. That's part of your inheritance from God. In verse 6, David says, "The lines have fallen to me in pleasant places. Yes, I have a good inheritance." David thinking about circumstances that were outside of his control. When he was in the wilderness being chased by Saul, and Saul was attempting to kill him. It wasn't through David's rebellion or through David's, some fault of his. It was a situation outside of his control. It was part of his inheritance. And he's looking to God and saying, what I have from you, God, is this inheritance. And even though there are these times where I have to say, preserve me, O God, even though there's these times I don't understand and have to call out to you, I know that my inheritance in you is good. The lines have fallen to me in pleasant places. I have a good inheritance. That all of these circumstances that are happening in my life and around me, Lord, it's a good inheritance from you. Pastor Warren Wiersbe says it this way: if Jesus is the Lord of our lives, then the possessions we have and the circumstances we are in represent the inheritance that he gives us. If Jesus is the Lord of your life, the things you're facing, the things you have, the things you don't have. Picture the tribes of Israel. Maybe you're one of the families within one of the tribes of Israel, and you're lining up to receive your inheritance, and you get the boundaries, and you look at it and you go, but this land is full of rocks. I wanted a land that was full of streams. And man, what a bummer. I ended up with a land full of rocks. Not a good inheritance, you might say. That's what happens many times in our lives. In the circumstances that we're facing, the things that we're going through, there's an inheritance that we have. Listen, I inherited baldness. You might try to blame my dad. You might try to blame my mom. Ultimately, I inherited that from God. And what a miserable life to live as a bald man. It's terrible. I could have that attitude. I could try to fake it. Some do, right? Not trying to pick on anybody in here, right? But some try to let's just pretend. Give me a Sharpie and look like Charlie Brown. It's part of my inheritance. And I can accept that. Listen, God knows what's best for me. He designed me and He created me in a particular way to experience the ultimate good that He has in store for me. That includes living life and going through life without much hair. And for us to be able to look at our circumstances and to look at our personalities, the things that we inherited, boy, that temper that you inherited from your parents, right? I wish I could be done away with that. What a terrible inheritance to get. What bad genes to get. I wish I didn't have this shape, in my body. I wish I didn't have this kind of eyesight or these kinds of teeth. Or I wish we can be very discontent. Or like David, we can say in verse 6, the lines have fallen to me in pleasant places. And so I'll embrace that I'm bald. I'll embrace what God has created me to be. And I'm not going to try to be somebody else or something else. I'm going to accept, Lord, you designed me in a particular way. And you gave me certain gifts and designed me to have a certain type of personality. And it's an inheritance that I have from you. I didn't generate this. I didn't create this. Lord, with you, I can understand that my inheritance, the way that you've created me, the way that you've designed me, what I have received in this life and the circumstances that I'm facing, Lord, it's a good inheritance. And you're able to do good and to work amazing things. And you, knowing what's best for me, designed me this way that I might experience for all eternity the goodness that you have in store for me. Some of the tribes of Israel did not like their inheritance. One tribe said, there's too many trees. It's going to be a lot of work cutting down all these trees. I didn't want this kind of inheritance. You might be going through life and looking around and thinking, man, everybody else seems to have it easy. Like life is just handed to them. And I have to do all this laborious sawing down and carrying logs. And it's so challenging and difficult. I didn't want this inheritance. But perhaps the Lord knows better than us and gave us that inheritance because He knows it's what's best for us. The tribe of Dan said, we don't really like our inheritance. We're going to go try to find another place to live. And they went out and murdered a bunch of people and did some turning away from God and just trying to find something easier for them rather than the task that God had given to them. But what would have been best for the tribe of Dan was for them to accept and say, God, this is a good inheritance. I don't understand it. It's not what I would have designed or asked for, perhaps. These circumstances, this situation, this kind of work, this kind of personality, this kind of, physical appearance, this kind of thing, I wouldn't have wanted that. But Lord, I'm going to accept that with you, all these things outside of my control, they're in your control. It's a good inheritance that I've received from you. Remind yourself how good you have it with God, designed perfectly for His plans and purposes, for your good, for all of eternity. Point number 4, with God, I have good counsel. Verse 7 and 8 says this, I will bless the Lord who has given me counsel. My heart also instructs me in the night seasons. I have set the Lord always before me. Because He is at my right hand, I shall not be moved. David, in the midst of a desperate situation, says, I will bless the Lord because he has given me counsel. In the midst of difficulty, he's able to recognize God doesn't just leave me without any instruction, without any guidance, and without any help. We don't always feel this immediately, of course, but there is a truth, there is a reality that we have a connection to the one who knows the beginning from the end. We have a connection and a relationship with God who knows for sure, without question, no speculation required, he knows what is best for us. He knows what schools we should go to. He knows what type of work we should pursue. He knows what type of relationships we should be involved in. He knows what type of shoes we should wear, whether or not we should wear boots. Where's Jonathan? As a recipient of a boot for many months, he knows what's best for us, right? And we can hear from him. With God, I have good counsel. I'm never without good counsel. I'm never without some good advice and some help in the decisions that I face and the things that I'm seeking to decide, seeking to discern. James tells us in James chapter 1, if anybody lacks wisdom, let him ask of God. And God gives wisdom generously to those who ask. We have the opportunity to hear from God. With God, I have good counsel. Part of that counsel, of course, is in his word. Psalm 119, 105, your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. You know, I'm really jealous many times of people because there are so many people who, they just have all of the answers. And I don't understand how they can have all the answers. But, you know, they just have their life planned out. They have their careers planned out. They have, you know, this is the course that we're going to take. And there's a great confidence and clarity of all the steps that need to be taken. You know, normally I do not have that kind of clarity to know all the steps and all the answers and all the, you know, details. I think perhaps in the past I did. And then what I discovered was that wasn't the Lord's path. It was just one that I could create and understand and enjoy. But now looking to the Lord and saying, Lord, your word is a lamp to my feet. I don't have to know all of the future. But Lord, with you I have good counsel. You lighten my next step, the path that is before me. I don't have all the answers. I don't know where exactly we're going and everything. I don't know all of the details about that. But Lord, I know that with you, I can have a lot of confidence as I walk with you that you will direct my next step. You'll show me which way to go, which way to walk. Similarly, in Psalm chapter 32, God speaking through David says, I will instruct you and teach you in the way you should go. I will guide you with my eye. But then he gives a little bit of a caution here. Do not be like the horse or like the mule, which have no understanding, which must be harnessed with bit and bridle, else they will not come near you. God introduces here this understanding that he wants to instruct us, he wants to teach us the way to go, he wants to guide us in the path that we have in this life, but there's also the opportunity to not listen. And like the horse or the mule, they don't just respond. They don't just automatically go the right way. They don't just take a little bit of a nudge, but they have to be harnessed. They have to be broken. They have to be mastered. God says, or else they will not come near you. God says, don't be like that. Don't be forced. Volunteer. And look to God, draw near to God, ask God. He has good counsel for you. I like what Pastor Warren Wisby said about this. He says, David's personal fellowship with the Lord was his greatest joy. This was when God instructed and counseled David and told him what to do and how to do it. David even went to night school to learn the will of God. I like that picture there, going to night school. My dad went to night school when I was growing up. Listen, going to night school, it's hard work because you go to night school because you got stuff going on during the day. And I think many times we would be happy to know the will of God as long as we could fit it into, the daytime activities. But to put in the extra effort and to invest some real time and go to night school and to make some sacrifices, to spend time with God and hear from Him, many times we're not willing to do that. But listen, God says it's available. Don't be stubborn like the horse or the mule and have to be harnessed in order to hear from me. Sign yourself up for night school. Sign yourself up for some extra time with God, some invested time in the Word and in fellowship and in prayer and in worship. Sign yourself up and draw near to God intentionally and personally. Because with God, you have good counsel. And He will give you everything that you need for this life. Well, finally, point number 5, with God, I will have fullness of joy, verses 9 through 11. Therefore, my heart is glad, and my glory rejoices. My flesh also will rest in hope, for you will not leave my soul in Sheol, nor will you allow your Holy One to see corruption. You will show me the path of life. In your presence is fullness of joy. At your right hand are pleasures forevermore. David here shares some words that are later quoted in the New Testament, applying directly to Jesus. And as much as this psalm is a psalm of David, about David's life and the things that he was going through, you can go back through this psalm, looking at it through the lens of speaking of the Messiah, Jesus. And there's a whole another field of crops that you can harvest from this psalm, recognizing the things that it says about the Lord in this. But just continuing to consider it from David's perspective. He says, look, my heart is glad and my glory rejoices. My flesh also will rest in hope. He's in distress. Lord, preserve me was the beginning of the psalm. But as he's reminded himself of what he has in God, how he can trust God, how he escapes many sorrows, has a good inheritance and good counsel, he's reminded, that's right. I have fullness of joy. My heart's glad. And I have this hope, this confidence. You will show me the path of life. And that path of life that you show me, it's to your presence, and it includes fullness of joy. Sin, temptation, you need to understand it for what it is. You've heard of get-rich-quick schemes. Every temptation is a get-joy-quick scheme. Like all these shortcuts to try to get pleasure, to get joy, to get satisfaction and fulfillment. And they will all fail, just like all the get-rich-quick schemes will fail. But in your presence is fullness of joy, Lord. And at your right hand are pleasures forevermore. God has eternity in store for you. The best of the best of the best, beyond what you could ever imagine. And so, let's look in the mirror this morning and remind ourselves how good we have it with God. With God, I have someone to trust. With God, I escape many sorrows. With God, I have a good inheritance. With God, I have good counsel. And with God, I have, or will have, fullness of joy. I get fullness of joy now when I walk with Him. Jesus said, what did He say? It was in John chapter 15. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept the Father's commandments and abide in His love. These things I have spoken to you that my joy may remain in you and that your joy may be full. There's a joy that we get now, that we enjoy now, but there's the future, the eternal, the presence of God, the fullness of joy that he has promised for us as well. And so we're going to wrap up our service this morning with a time of communion, and so I'll invite Lena and I don't know, should I call out Fia? All right, Fia, come on up, and let's worship the Lord. The guys are going to pass out the bread and the cup. You can hold both portions. Actually, go ahead and partake of the bread and the cup at any time during the worship song, and Lena will give you a chance to partake at the end if you haven't. But, Jesus gave us the communion elements for what? To remember. To look in the mirror and stir yourself up and remind yourself how good you have it, because he sacrificed himself, the bread representing his body that was broken for us, the cup representing his blood that was shed. To solidify all of these things, you have someone you can trust. You know you can trust the Lord because he was willing to sacrifice himself, to die for you, to die for me upon the cross. You have someone that you can trust and count on. You're escaping many sorrows, and you can know that's the truth because the one who came from eternity and went to eternity told you, follow me. On and on and on I can go, but let's take this time to remember. And then as you remember, as you've completed your routine in the mirror and stirred yourself up, you're satisfied with and excited about all the good that you have with God, then partake of the bread and cup again and remember what Christ has done for you. And again, at the end, Lena will give you an opportunity to partake. Let's worship the Lord together.
We pray you have been blessed by this Bible teaching. The power of God to change a life is found in the daily reading of his word. Visit ferventword.com to find more teachings and Bible study resources.